The letter that turned my world upside down was penned with a secret so potent it reeked of betrayal. Dive with me into the depths of a mystery that begins with an innocent envelope lying amidst a pile of mundane mail. I am Emily, and I never expected a piece of paper to be the key that unlocked the Pandora's box of my family's darkest secrets, but there it was, a silent herald of the storm to come. As you join me on this first step down a path paved with clandestine whispers and the echoes of a forbidden past, brace yourself, for every secret unearthed will challenge the very essence of what I believed to be true. Chapter 1. Secret Letter, Unearths Family Scandal That Will Leave You Speechless. It was a damp Tuesday afternoon when my life took a turn into the pages of a scandal novel. There I was, Emily Carter, an editor by trade, a wife by choice, and a skeptic by nature, sitting at my cluttered kitchen table, sifting through the usual mix of bills and leaflets when an unassuming envelope caught my eye. It was the kind of letter that whispered rather than shouted, but its message was about to scream scandal in a way that would echo through the very foundations of my life. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant but rushed, as if the sender was determined yet fearful, a combination that piqued my curiosity more than the bland anonymity of a typed font ever could. To Emily, with the truth, the envelope stated, and nothing more. Inside, a single sheet of paper held words that would unravel me. Your life is not what it seems. The past is a lie, cloaked in secrets. Seek the truth about your mother's romance and discover the family you never knew you had. I laughed at first, a hearty, disbelieving chuckle. A prank, surely. My mother, bless her departed soul, was as ordinary as they came, or so I believed. She was a woman of cardigans and casserole, not secrets and scandals. But the laugh died in my throat as a chill of foreboding trickled down my spine. For years, I'd been content, nestled in the arms of a quiet life with a man who loved me, or at least I thought he did. Our love was comfortable, like a well-worn shoe, not the fiery passion of storybooks, but it was mine, and it was enough. Or so I told myself, as the whispers of that letter began to gnaw at me. I couldn't let it go. It clung to me like the scent of a forbidden perfume, luring me with the promise of a hidden narrative beneath the bland pages of my life. The notion that my mother, the very picture of suburban virtue, could have harboured secrets was ludicrous, and yet, here I was, considering the possibility. I turned to my husband, Mark, with the letter in hand, ready to share a laugh over the ridiculousness of it all. But the words died on my lips when I saw the look in his eyes, the briefest flicker of something unreadable before it shuttered into the usual comforting warmth. In that moment, doubt took root, fed by that unspoken glimmer. What did I really know about my mother? There were memories, of course, but they were child's recollections, simple and untainted by complexity. She was loving, certainly, and kind, but she was also private, a part of her forever locked away. Even as a child, I sensed there were chapters of her life I wasn't privy to, stories she tucked away in the attic of her mind, behind the Christmas decorations and boxes of old photographs. As the evening drew in and Mark retreated to his study, his sanctuary from the mundane aspects of our domesticity, I made a decision. I'd go to the attic, that shadowed place of forgotten things, and look for clues. Climbing the creaking ladder into the dimly lit attic felt like stepping into the past. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light piercing through the small window, each one a tiny beacon in the gloom. Boxes upon boxes greeted me, each a Pandora's box of memories, innocent on the outside, but possibly brimming with secrets on the inside. I rummaged through them, heart racing with a mix of dread and an unquenchable thirst for answers. Old clothes, books, my father's discarded pipe that still held the scent of his tobacco. All these things I passed by until I found it, Her box. It was a simple wooden thing, carved with the delicate roses she so loved, and it was locked. I hesitated, my hands trembling. The lock was a clear statement of privacy, a boundary set by a woman who was no longer here to enforce it. But the letter's poison was in my veins now, coursing with every beat of my heart, compelling me to break the sanctity of the past. With a hairpin and a silent apology to the ghost of my mother, I picked the lock. Inside, the scent of lavender and secrets wafted out. Letters tied with a ribbon, a diary with a worn leather cover, and a photograph of a man I didn't recognize, his eyes hauntingly familiar, stared back at me. I began to read the diary, and with each word, my mother's life unfolded, a tapestry of love, loss, and passion that was as beautiful as it was forbidden. She wrote of an artist, a man who brought colour to her monochrome world, who painted her in strokes of love and left her canvas forever changed. The clock struck midnight as I turned the last page of the diary, my mind reeling. The man in the photograph, the artist, could he be? My thoughts were interrupted by a noise from the study, a muffled curse from Mark, and the unmistakable sound of something being hastily concealed. My heart pounded, not just from the revelations of the diary, but from the sudden, visceral fear of what my own investigation might unearth. I placed the diary back in the box, the letters still unread, the questions multiplying like shadows in the dusk. Tomorrow I would confront Mark, I decided. Tomorrow I would demand the truth. But tonight I would lay beside him, a stranger, my heart a tumult of emotions, and my mind swirling with the tantalizing, terrifying beginnings of a truth I was only just beginning to comprehend. As sleep eluded me, one question rose above the others, demanding attention with the urgency of a siren's call. If the past was a lie, then what was my present?